Have you ever noticed how the most shocking stories don't burst into the world with fireworks, but instead arrive quietly, like a closed door you were never meant to open? What if I told you that the moment Princess and Prince William stepped across the threshold of Sarah Ferguson's private bedroom, something shifted in the royal family forever? Not in a symbolic way, not in a dramatic metaphor, but in a real, physical, impossible-to-explain moment involving two chilling objects lying where no one expected them to be, a mask and a knife. Why were they there? Who put them there? And why did both royals react with a level of tension usually reserved for state emergencies? Before this moment, most people assumed that the British monarchy's biggest threats came from headlines, scandals, or the occasional poorly timed Oprah interview. But what if the danger had always been lurking inside the palace walls? What if the secret everyone missed wasn't about marriages, titles, or money, but identity, loyalty, and fear? But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. You might be wondering why Princess Anne was even there. Why William wasn't at a public engagement, smiling for cameras. Why Sarah Ferguson, a woman long dismissed by tabloids as harmlessly chaotic, was suddenly at the center of something that rattled the two most steady figures in the royal lineup. And why this moment matters now more than ever. Because this wasn't just an odd discovery. It was a trigger, a fuse, a quiet explosion that sent ripples through conversations that were never recorded, meetings that were never announced, and decisions that were never explained to the public. The monarchy moves slowly in public, but behind the scenes, it can move like lightning. And this moment, this discovery, was lightning. But let's go back for a second. Think about Princess Anne, the no-nonsense royal, the one known for eye rolls, sharp wit, and walking faster than palace staff can keep up with. She doesn't overreact. She doesn't play into theatrics. She doesn't gasp, widen her eyes, or clasp her pearls. So ask yourself, what would it take for Princess Anne to stop in her tracks inside Sarah Ferguson's bedroom and stare in silence? What would make William lower his voice, glance toward the door, and shift his weight like someone bracing for impact? This wasn't about curiosity. It was about recognition. Something about those objects meant something to them. Something personal. Something historical. Something dangerous. The public never heard about this moment. There were no leaks. No rumors. No mysterious palace insider quotes in magazines. It was buried so deeply that even longtime royal observers missed the tremor. But here's the unsettling part. The effects of that moment are visible everywhere now, if you know where to look. Tiny shifts in protocol. Seating arrangements that suddenly changed. Titles reassigned. Invitations withdrawn. Statements rewritten. Silence where there should have been warmth. Distance where there used to be obligation. And if you think all of that sounds dramatic, ask yourself another question. Why did the royal family suddenly tighten its circle at the exact moment this discovery happened? Maybe you've noticed the way William has taken a more assertive role. Maybe you've seen how and has become more protective, more vocal, more present. Maybe you caught the strangely timed resurfacing of old photographs featuring Sarah Ferguson that seemed harmless on the surface, but appeared at moments that made no sense. Coincidence? The monarchy does not run on coincidence. It runs on control, and control is only enforced when something threatens it. So what was the threat? The mask, the knife, and the possibility that neither object was supposed to be found. Or worse, both were meant to be found. Let's pause here and look at Sarah Ferguson for a moment. She has always been treated as a wild card. Sometimes embraced, sometimes pushed aside, sometimes pitted, sometimes laughed at, but underestimated? Always. And that's the dangerous part. Because underestimated people have power no one prepares for. They move quietly. They are dismissed, overlooked, ignored, until suddenly they aren't. Until suddenly, the room goes still and everyone realizes they should have been paying attention all along. Was this one of those moments? Or was she the distraction? That's the question William seemed to be asking the second he stepped into that room. Not, what are these objects? But, who are these objects about? Was the mask a replica of someone's face? Was the knife a relic, a threat, a symbol, or something else entirely? Was this about Sarah? Or was Sarah simply housing a secret that belonged to someone else? Imagine William looking at the objects and realizing the implications. Imagine Princess Anne, the human lie detector of the royal family, recognizing something immediately. Imagine both of them exchanging a glance that said everything without a word spoken. And imagine that somewhere, someone else in the palace already knew this moment was coming. Why now? Why this moment? Why this discovery? Because timing is never random in the royal world. There is always a reason, a build-up, a trigger point. And the days leading up to this discovery were filled with subtle tension. The public didn't notice it, but the family did. A canceled lunch, a delayed announcement, a meeting rescheduled at the last second. People thought these were ordinary scheduling adjustments. They weren't. They were avoidance patterns. Something was happening behind the scenes, and this bedroom moment was the key. Let's talk about the emotional tone of that room. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't theatrical. It was tense in a quiet, suffocating way, the kind of tension that doesn't shout, but whispers. The kind that makes your heart beat louder in your ears. The kind that tells you instinctively that something is wrong, even if you don't understand why. William felt it, and felt it. And if you were there, you would have felt it too. But here's the real question. Were they meant to find the mask and the knife? Or were they meant to find what those objects implied? Different question, different stakes. Because a mask suggests hidden identity, secrets, pretending, someone being someone they are not. A knife suggests danger, protection, threat, defense, ritual, ceremony. Both together, that combination tells a story. But whose story? As William reached toward the objects, there was a moment, small, almost invisible, where he hesitated. Not because he was afraid of the objects themselves, but because he was afraid of the meaning. And watched him, and in her eyes was something rare, caution. She has seen enough history unfold to know when a moment is about to become part of a larger narrative. And she knew this was one of those moments. Now, why does this matter today? Because the monarchy is in a moment of transition. Power is shifting. Public perception is volatile. Loyalties are unclear. Some members are rising. Some are fading. Some are being erased. And in the middle of that transition, a discovery like this isn't just an odd coincidence. It's a spark near dry leaves. It suggests there is a story beneath the surface, one that has been buried, denied, forgotten, or deliberately concealed. And here's the part that should make you lean closer. The mask and the knife weren't old. They weren't dusty. They weren't tucked away like forgotten heirlooms. They were placed, recently, deliberately, as if waiting. The bedroom was quiet. The air was still, and the realization settled over both royals like a weight. This wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of unraveling something the monarchy had tried to keep contained. Something about identity, something about loyalty, something about protection, something that might explain decisions, rivalries, distancing, and silence over the years. But before either of them could speak, before they could form the questions that were forming in their minds, something happened that neither expected. A sound in the hallway, a presence, a shift, and suddenly, everything they thought they were controlling slipped out of their hands. Because they were not alone, the silence was the first warning sign. Not the kind of silence that feels peaceful or quiet or respectful, but the kind that settles into a room like a held breath. The kind that tells you something is off before your mind can explain why. Princess Anne felt at the moment she stepped across the threshold of Sarah Ferguson's bedroom. She stopped, just for a second, not because she was startled, but because her instincts, honed over decades of palace life, diplomacy, and private crisis, told her that something here required caution. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her expression, sharp and assessing, said enough. William, a step behind her, noticed it too. His eyes moved quickly, scanning the room the way a trained heir does, observing exits, details, placement, atmosphere. But the strange thing? Nothing looked obviously wrong. The curtains were open, letting in a soft, gray English light. The bed was made, crisp and symmetrical. A book rested neatly on the bedside table. Fresh flowers, roses, sat in a vase. Even the cushions were arranged with an almost hotel-like precision. There was no mess, no chaos. Nothing to suggest that this was a room belonging to someone known for a life that occasionally tipped toward disorder. And yet, the tension in the air suggested that something was hidden in plain sight, something waiting to be noticed. Why was Princess Anne here in the first place? She wasn't scheduled to see Sarah. She had no social call planned, no official duty connected to this part of the residence. But earlier that morning, Anne had received information, quietly, discreetly, directly. That something in Sarah's bedroom required her attention. Not staff attention. Hers. And that alone was enough to make her walk briskly across the palace corridor with the kind of urgency usually reserved for matters of security or dignity. William joined her not because he was asked to, but because he sensed something significant was unfolding. He had learned, especially in recent years, that the smallest details in royal life often signal the biggest problems. He spoke first, breaking the silence. "It doesn't feel like her," he said quietly, and didn't look at him. She continued scanning the room. "No, it doesn't." And that was true. Sarah Ferguson was lively, expressive, emotional. Her spaces usually reflected that. Books stacked, scarves draped, framed photos slightly uneven, perfume bottles arranged like a playful still life. But this room felt controlled, composed, sterile, as if someone had erased the person who lived in it. Was that intentional? Was someone trying to project calm or conceal disorder? Then came the question both were thinking, but only William voiced. "Where is she?" That was the part that didn't make sense. Sarah had been in the residence earlier. Staff confirmed it. A tray had been delivered. Clothing had been laid out. A conversation with a dresser had been overheard. Then, nothing. No exit. No car. No announcement. No trace. It was as if she had vanished inside her own living space. And that was when Princess Anne made the decision to enter the bedroom herself. She didn't send staff. She didn't ask security. She didn't consult protocol. She walked in. And now, standing in the middle of the room, she felt something tightening in her chest. Not fear, but recognition. Something here connected to something else. Something from the past. Something she hadn't thought about in years. But William noticed something too. Something small, something barely visible. His attention shifted toward a chest of drawers near the far wall. He didn't move toward it immediately. He watched it, as if waiting for and to notice it too. She followed his gaze, and for a moment they stood there, both staring at a piece of furniture as if it were capable of breathing. Why that drawer? Why that moment? Why that shared instinct? Because something was slightly off. The drawer was not fully aligned. Just a fraction of an inch out of place, enough that someone with a trained eye could spot it. Someone like William. Someone like him. And moved toward it slowly, not dramatically, but with intention. William didn't stop her. He didn't offer to take the lead. He knew better than to interrupt her intuition. When Anne reached the drawer, she paused again. Not because she was afraid, but because she understood that once she opened it, something would shift. Once seen, it could not be unseen. Once discovered, it would require response. She pulled the drawer open, and that was when she gasped. Not loudly, not theatrically, but softly, sharp, involuntary, unfiltered. A sound no one in the palace had heard from her in decades. William stepped closer, his expression tightening. "What is it?" And didn't answer at first. She stared into the drawer, her eyes narrowing, her breath steadying. Then she stepped aside, allowing William to see inside. There, placed with deliberate care, were two objects. A mask and a knife. The moment stretched, heavy and silent. William didn't reach for them. He didn't speak. His face shifted through recognition, confusion, disbelief, and watched him, studying his reaction. Because she already knew one thing. He had seen these objects before. Maybe not here. Maybe not together. But somewhere. In some context. Connected to someone. Connected to something. The mask was unsettling. Not theatrical, not playful, not decorative. Its features were smooth, pale, expressionless, almost human-like, but not quite. Too blank. Too quiet. The kind of mask used not for celebration, but for concealment. A mask meant to erase the identity of the wearer. To hide. To imitate. Or to replace. William stared at it longer than expected. Then his eyes shifted to the knife. Wrapped in cloth. Placed with precision. Waiting. The knife was not a kitchen knife. Not a decorative piece. Not a theatrical prop. It was something else. Something older, heavier, sharper, meaningful. The cloth around it suggested protection, not of people, but of the blade itself. William leaned closer, noticing the handle. There was something engraved there. Something faint. Something familiar. And saw him recognize it. "You've seen it before, haven't you?" He didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, he asked a different question. Why would she have these? And didn't speculate. She didn't allow emotion into her voice. She simply said, "Someone wanted them to be found." And that changed everything. Because that meant intent. Not accident. Not storage. Not secrecy. Display. William finally touched the cloth, lifting it slightly to reveal more of the handle. And when he did, his eyes widened. Not dramatically, but the way someone reacts when a puzzle piece locks into place. "We shouldn't be here," he said quietly. Anne's reply was immediate. "We had to be here." The tension between those two sentences hung in the air. Then, something else caught William's attention. Something even more unsettling. A piece of paper tucked underneath the knife. Just the corner of it visible. He reached for it slowly, pulling it out enough to read part of a handwritten message. The ink was dark, the handwriting firm, deliberate, unmistakably personal. But the paper was torn. Only half the message remained. It read, "It must be done before." Before what? Before who arrives? Before who finds out? Before what event? And stared at the torn note, her mind racing through possibilities. Royal life is full of before moments. Before announcements. Before succession shifts. Before scandals break. Before decisions harden. The missing half of the note could change everything. Without it, the meaning could twist in any direction. William looked toward the doorway, suddenly alert. "Did you hear that?" And listened. The hallway, once quiet, now carried the faint sound of movement. Not loud, not hurried, but intentional. Someone was approaching. Someone who should not know they were here. Someone who might already know. And closed the drawer halfway. Not fully, not hiding it, but signaling possession. William stepped back, his posture shifting into guarded calm. Who would be coming toward this room at this exact moment? A staff member? Unlikely. Security? Impossible. Sarah? Maybe. Or someone else entirely. Anne's voice was low, controlled. "Don't speak. Don't react." Footsteps grew clearer. William's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from anticipation. Because whoever was about to appear would change the direction of this discovery. Either confirm it, deny it, or complicate it beyond anything they were prepared for. And just as the shadow of a figure passed across the light beneath the door, both royals realized the same thing at the same time. They were not supposed to find the mask and the knife first. And what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. William didn't realize he was holding his breath until the footsteps stopped. The shadow beneath the door froze, motionless, as if whoever stood there was listening just as intently as they were. Princess and didn't move a muscle. She stood perfectly still, hands relaxed at her sides, face unreadable, body positioned squarely between the drawer and the doorway. William felt the instinctive pull of adrenaline, not panic, but readiness. Royals are trained, in ways the public never sees, to remain calm at moments when most people would crumble. And yet, something about this silence, this presence, this pause outside the door, felt different. It felt calculated. Then, without warning, the footsteps began moving again, slowly, deliberately, continuing down the corridor until they faded into silence. William exhaled, and didn't. "That wasn't staff," she said quietly. William nodded. Staff walked differently. Staff announced themselves. Staff do not approach royal bedrooms in silence, pause, and then leave without knocking or speaking. So who was it? Before either could answer, another realization settled in. Something subtle but undeniable. William's reaction to the drawer earlier hadn't been confusion. It had been familiarity. When he saw the mask, his expression had tightened. When he touched the knife, his eyes shifted with recognition. Anne had noticed. She turned and looked at him now, not accusingly, but with expectation. "You know something about these objects," she said. William didn't answer at first. He walked toward the window, looking out over the palace grounds. Not because he needed the view, but because he needed space to think. The air outside was crisp, the sky heavy with low clouds. A typical British day. But inside this room, everything felt heightened, charged, poised on the edge of revelation. When William finally spoke, his voice was low. "I've seen that mask before." And waited. She didn't press him. She knew that silence, used properly, pulls truth to the surface faster than interrogation. William continued. "Years ago, at an event, not a public one, something private, something meant to be forgotten." Anne's eyes sharpened. "And the knife?" William hesitated again, but only for a moment. "Not the knife itself, But the engraving. It's connected to something in the archives. Something sealed. Archives. Sealed. The kind of words that in royal circles don't mean dusty books and forgotten documents, but classified history. Family secrets. Buried narratives. Stories erased from public memory because they were too dangerous, too destabilizing, or too revealing. And step closer to him. Tell me exactly where you saw the mask. But before William could answer, something else caught his attention. Something he hadn't noticed earlier. A framed photograph on the dresser. It looked harmless at first glance, Sarah smiling beside a garden fountain. But when William picked it up, he noticed something strange. The photograph had been replaced. The frame was old, but the picture was new. Too new. Recent. And in the reflection of the glass, barely noticeable unless you looked closely, was part of a second image behind it. A hidden photo tucked between the backing and the frame. William slid it out and leaned in. It was a picture of three people. Sarah, yes, but also someone else. Someone neither William nor Anne expected to see connected to this room, this drawer, these objects. Someone whose relationship to the monarchy had always been ambiguous. Someone who had disappeared from public view years ago. Why would Sarah hide this? William asked, and didn't answer immediately. She studied the faces, the setting, the expressions. The man in the photo stood slightly behind Sarah, his posture protective, his gaze alert. The background wasn't a palace, a garden, a public venue, but an interior space with ornate paneling, soft lamplight, and heavy curtains. A place that suggested secrecy, privacy, meetings that were not supposed to exist. And finally spoke. Because if this photograph were seen, questions would follow. And questions lead to truths. William placed the photo on the dresser and returned to the drawer, staring at the mask again. The blankness of its expression now felt more pointed, as if daring him to interpret it. He reached out and lifted it carefully, turning it over to examine the inside. And that was when he saw it, another marking. Small, etched near the inner edge. A symbol, one he had seen only once before. He spoke without looking up. This wasn't Sarah's. And closed her eyes for a brief moment, not in frustration, but in confirmation. She had suspected as much. Sarah may have possessed the mask, but she had not been the one to wear it. So whose was it? And why was it here? William set the mask down and turned toward the bed. Something about it now seemed staged. Not the bedding itself, but the placement of one pillow slightly differently than the others, just enough to suggest someone had sat there recently. Someone waiting. Someone watching. Someone deciding. And walked to the bedside table. Another object, previously unnoticed, now stood out. A glass of water. Half full. Not dusty. Not warm. Recently used. But there was no lipstick. No fingerprints. No residue. As if someone had lifted it with gloves. Or wiped it clean. Or never intended to leave evidence of having been there. William asked the question forming in both their minds. Did Sarah leave willingly? Anne's answer was immediate. No. That single word shifted the atmosphere again. If Sarah hadn't left willingly, then she had been removed, lured, or warned. And if someone wanted these objects to be found, then whoever placed them here wasn't afraid of exposure. They were orchestrating it. William turned back to the half-torn note. Before what? And didn't speculate. She didn't spin theories aloud. She simply replayed every recent royal development in her mind like a sequence of chess moves. And there were many. Too many. William, meanwhile, was thinking of something else. The look on his father's face during their last conversation. The way his grandmother, when she was alive, had once said that danger in the royal family never comes from outside. It comes from within. Then Princess Anne did something William did not expect. She walked to Sarah's wardrobe and opened it. Dresses, jackets, scarves, shoes, all arranged neatly. But one space was empty. A hanger without clothing. A gap among the garments. That absence spoke louder than anything else in the room. And turned to him. Someone left here with something. William felt his chest tighten again. The mask? The knife? The missing half of the note? Or something worse? Before he could ask, Anne added. And they left quickly, because the wardrobe wasn't disturbed. The space wasn't rearranged. Only one missing piece, meaning it was chosen, selected, pulled with purpose. William began pacing slowly, his mind racing through names, possibilities, motives. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, lower, more controlled. If someone wanted us to find these items, then someone also wanted us to draw conclusions. The wrong ones. And met his gaze. Or the right ones. The room felt smaller now. Not physically, but psychologically. William walked back to the drawer and looked at the knife again. Not the blade, still wrapped, but the hilt. The engraving. The symbol. Something ancestral. He tried to place it. Tried to recall where he had seen it. Then it clicked. It wasn't in the archives. It was in a portrait. A painting in a restricted gallery. One he'd been shown only once, as part of a historical briefing. A portrait of a royal ancestor whose name was intentionally minimized in official lineage discussions. Someone whose reputation had been quietly erased. Someone associated with secrecy, ritual, and a political fracture the monarchy never acknowledged publicly. And watched realization spread across his face. "You remember it," she said. William nodded slowly. "Yes," and took a steadying breath. "Then this is not about Sarah." And it never was. William looked around the room again, as if seeing it for the first time. "So what is it about?" And didn't answer. Because the footsteps returned. This time, they stopped directly outside the door. A hand touched the doorknob. And as it began to turn, both royals understood something undeniable. Whoever was entering knew exactly what they were about to witness. And what happened next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. The doorknob turned slowly, not with the hurried motion of someone entering casually, but with the deliberate pressure of someone who already knew the room was occupied. William's muscles tensed instinctively. Princess and didn't step back, didn't shift, didn't display even a flicker of alarm, but her eyes sharpened with the focus of someone preparing for confrontation. The latch clicked. The door eased open. And then, instead of a person stepping inside, the door stopped, partway, as if whoever stood behind it wanted to listen first. William spoke before and could. "If you're coming in, come in." A challenge. Calm, steady, unmistakably authoritative. The kind of tone only someone born into power can summon without effort. The door opened the rest of the way. And there, standing in the doorway, was not Sarah Ferguson. Not a staff member. Not security. It was a royal aide. One of the longest serving. One trusted. One discreet. One whose job relied entirely on being invisible. But his face was pale. And his eyes flicked. Not toward William. Not toward but toward the drawer. He knew. And noticed it instantly. "You're not assigned to this wing," she said. The aide swallowed, his throat tightening, but he recovered quickly. There was concern about the Duchess's whereabouts. William stepped closer, not threatening, but commanding. "Did someone send you?" The aide hesitated just long enough to confirm the answer. "I was informed Her Royal Highness and His Royal Highness were here and instructed to ensure everything was in order." And cut in. "By whom?" Another pause. Too long. No one pauses that long unless the truth is dangerous. The aide lowered his eyes. "I wasn't given a name." William exchanged a glance with Anne. They both knew what that meant. Someone was watching. Someone was tracking movement. Someone was aware that Anne and William had entered the room almost immediately after the disappearance of Sarah. And someone wanted to control the narrative. And stepped forward, closing the distance between herself and the aide. "Describe the message exactly as it was delivered to you." The aide clasped his hands behind his back, a reflex of someone reverting to training. "I was told there had been an unexpected absence, and that this room required confirmation of neutrality." Neutrality. A strange word. A word not used casually in royal vocabulary. Neutrality meant something that must not influence perception. Something without implication. Something stripped of meaning. But the objects in the drawer were anything but neutral. William spoke slowly. "What did you expect to find when you came here?" The aide's expression flickered, just for a heartbeat, but enough to reveal fear. "I didn't expect to find you, sir." Not an answer. Avoidance. And changed tactics. "Have you seen the Duchess today?" The aide nodded. "Yes, earlier. Briefly." "Describe her." Another flicker. "She seemed preoccupied. Not distressed. Not ill. Not hurried. Preoccupied." A word used to describe someone thinking about something they cannot speak aloud. William stepped back slightly, studying the aide the way he might study a witness in a security briefing. What was she wearing? The aide blinked, caught off guard by the specificity. A dark green jacket. And a scarf. What color scarf? Red. And then William exchanged another quick look. Red. Not a random detail. Red meant something in royal internal signaling. Red meant do not approach. Not danger. Not fear. Boundary. Withdrawal. Protection of information. N's voice softened, not kindly, but strategically. What direction was she walking when you saw her? Toward the east wing, the aide replied. William frowned. But she's not there. The aide shook his head. No, sir. Then he added something unexpected. She said she would return shortly. N's eyes narrowed. And how long ago was that? 3 hours. 3 hours was not shortly. William pressed further. Did she say where she was going? The aide hesitated again, then nodded. Yes. She said she was going somewhere she used to feel safe. N's breath caught. Not visibly, but in the subtle tightening of her jaw. That could mean only one of 3 locations. None of them were near the palace. None of them were monitored. And only someone who knew Sarah personally would know which one she meant. William understood instantly. N's voice lowered to a tone that signaled transition. Thank you. That will be all. The aide bowed slightly, relieved to be dismissed, and stepped backward out of the room. But just before the door fully closed, and spoke again, without turning, without raising her voice. If you tell anyone we were here, I will know. The aide froze. Then he nodded once and disappeared down the corridor. The door clicked shut. Silence returned. But now the silence had shifted. Before, it had been ominous. Now, it was purposeful, filled with thought, interpretation, strategy. William turned back to the drawer, pulled it open again, and stared at the mask. And watched him. You said you saw it before. William nodded slowly. Yes, at Balmoral. N's eyes widened, not dramatically, but enough to signal significance. When? William exhaled slowly, as if pulling the memory from a place he had buried. I was 12. There was a gathering. A private one. Not everyone was invited. I was told not to speak of it afterward, and remained still, letting him continue. There were performances. Not plays. Not music. Something else. Something symbolic. And finished the thought for him. Ritual. William didn't argue. Yes. He looked at the mask again. Someone wore a mask just like this. Not theatrical. Not decorative. Expressionless. Anonymous. A mask meant to remove identity. N's voice was quiet. Who wore it? William shook his head. I don't know. They didn't speak. They didn't remove it. They didn't move like themselves. And stepped closer. But you recognized them anyway. William swallowed. Yes. Recognition without naming. Identity without confirmation. Truth without proof. And asked the next question carefully. And the knife? William's gaze shifted to it. Not this knife, but one like it. Same engraving. Same weight. Same history. It was presented, not used. Displayed. As if it symbolized something. And absorbed the information, her mind constructing a framework. This connects to someone in the family line who was removed from history. William nodded. A name erased. A legacy rewritten. A person declared unstable, dangerous, or unfit. But the real reason was different. The real reason was. And finished again. Power. William's voice dropped even lower. An inheritance. The implications rippled through the air like a cold draft. A hidden lineage. A concealed successor. A suppressed claim. And turned away from the drawer and looked around the room again, scanning it with a fresh lens. The bed. The flowers. The wardrobe. The framed photo. Nothing here was random. Someone had staged this room to send a message. Not just to anyone. To them. William spoke again. There's something else here. Something we haven't seen. And nodded slowly. Yes. Something that explains why the mask and the knife were left together. Something that connects Sarah to the history no one is allowed to discuss. William walked toward the fireplace, scanning the mantel, and returned to the bedside table. They searched not frantically, but deliberately, looking for something that didn't belong, something too ordinary, something intentionally subtle. William found it first. A book. Not an old one. Not a new one. A particular one. He picked it up and turned it over, showing the cover to in. It was a biography. A biography of the erased ancestor. One that had been out of print for decades. One that only existed in private collections. One that contained a single chapter later removed from every edition. And stared at it. Where did she get this? William opened the book. The pages were stiff. Unread. Except one. A page marked with a pressed flower. A white lily. And the passage it marked? A description of a child. A child born in secrecy. A child whose identity was hidden. A child whose lineage threatened the stability of the monarchy. N's voice was barely audible. This is why the knife was wrapped. It wasn't meant to threaten. It was meant to protect. William looked up sharply. Protect who? And met his gaze. Not Sarah. Not us. Someone else. William felt his pulse in his throat. Someone alive? And didn't blink. Yes. But before either could say another word, something happened that froze them both. The photograph on the dresser, the one they had examined earlier, began to slide. Not because of movement, not because of vibration, but because there was something behind it. Something pushing it forward. And stepped toward it. William held his breath. She lifted the frame away from the wall. And behind it was a hidden compartment. A shallow recess. Inside it, another mask. Identical. Except for one detail. This one had an inscription burned into the inside. And when Anne read it, her face went still. She read it aloud. For the one who must remain unseen until the time is right. William stared at her. What time? And closed the compartment slowly. The time when the truth can no longer be contained. Before William could respond, something interrupted them. A sound. A vibration. A single chime. William pulled his phone from his pocket. A message. No words. Just a photograph. A live shot. Of the mask and knife. Taken from inside the room. From moments earlier. Which meant only one thing. Someone else had been watching the entire time. And what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. The photograph on William's phone seemed to pulse with significance. The image was crisp, perfectly framed, unmistakably recent. The mask and the knife. Exactly as they had been placed in the drawer, before anyone had touched them, before and had gasped, before William had lifted the cloth. Someone had taken that photo from inside the room. Someone had been close enough, still enough, hidden enough to capture it without either royal noticing. William felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the sensation that accompanies the sudden awareness of surveillance. And didn't ask to see the phone. She didn't need to. The look on William's face told her everything. How long have they been watching? She asked quietly. William shook his head. Long enough. The room felt different now, darker, smaller, as if walls had shifted inward. Not because of fear, but because of implication. Someone had access. Someone had proximity. Someone had intent. And stepped away from the drawer, her mind processing layers at once. Who had clearance? Who had motive? Who had knowledge? Who had silence in their history? William zoomed in on the image, searching for reflections, shadows, angles, anything that might reveal the photographer. Nothing. Whoever took the picture was careful, professional, or worse. Familiar with the techniques used by palace security, surveillance countermeasures, and intelligence screening. William swallowed slowly. This wasn't a leak. It was a signal, and began pacing, not nervously, but analytically, her footsteps measured, controlled, rhythmically aligning with thought. William finally broke the silence. There's only one reason someone sends a photograph like this. And nodded. To let us know they were here first. But William wasn't finished. And to let us know we're already behind. That truth lingered in the air like fog. Thick, obscuring, chilling. And turned toward the fireplace. Her eyes tracing the molding, the stonework, the air vents, the ornamental carvings. Hidden cameras could be anywhere. Micro devices, remote lenses, thermal imaging. 1,000 ways to watch without being seen. She spoke without turning. We cannot discuss anything else in this room. William agreed immediately. The walls in royal residences have always been metaphorically said to have ears. Now, it seemed, the metaphor was literal, and gestured toward the door, not urgently, but decisively. William slipped the phone into his pocket, and together they exited the bedroom, closing the door behind them. The corridor outside was quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that suggests removal rather than absence. William scanned both directions. Where is everyone? And answered without hesitation. Moved. By who? And raised her eyebrows slightly. By whoever wanted us to find that drawer alone. They began walking, not quickly, not slowly, maintaining the pace of people deep in conversation rather than retreat. Appearances mattered. Panic drew attention. Calm drew information. William lowered his voice. We need to examine that engraving properly. And agreed. And the inscription inside the second mask. William's mind raced back to the phrase carved inside. For the one who must remain unseen until the time is right. A chilling line. Not poetic. Not decorative. Functional. Predictive. Planned. and spoke softly, but with certainty. That inscription confirms it wasn't symbolic. It was literal. William exhaled. There's someone alive. And nodded. And someone protected. William looked straight ahead, processing implications. If there is someone with a concealed lineage. And finished the sentence again. Then every succession line becomes unstable. That sentence carried weight heavier than steel. Succession is the spine of monarchy. Alter it, and the entire body collapses. William continued walking, but his pulse quickened. There's something else, he said. The torn note. And waited. It must be done before. Before what? Before who? Before a coronation? Before an announcement? Before a birthday? Before a death? Before a medical update? Before an abdication? The possibilities were a labyrinth. Anne's reply came quietly. Before the truth surfaces on its own. William considered another angle. Or before someone claims what was denied to them, and didn't dismiss it. Possibly both. They reached a junction in the corridor, the point where two wings diverged. One path led back toward the public areas of the residence. The other led deeper into private spaces. And chose neither. Instead, she stopped. We need to understand why Sarah had the objects. William nodded. If she had them willingly. And continued. Or if she was keeping them hidden from someone else. William completed the thought. Or for someone else. The air shifted again. Because that was the possibility neither wanted to articulate, but both needed to consider. Sarah might not be victim. She might be guardian. William leaned slightly closer. If Sarah was protecting someone, and spoke firmly, then taking her away was the first step. William's jaw tightened. You believe she was removed? And met his gaze. She wouldn't leave those items unattended. Not if she understood what they were. William thought of the scarf. Red. Withdrawal. Boundary. Protection of information. He thought of the aide's description, preoccupied. He thought of the empty hanger. She took something with her. And nodded. The question is what? William considered what was missing. The other half of the note. A document. A photograph. A letter. A relic. Or something far more dangerous, a confirmation. And started walking again, motioning for William to follow. They needed a location where privacy was guaranteed. A place without surveillance. A place designed before technology existed. They headed toward one of the oldest parts of the estate. Stone corridors, thick walls, no wiring in the foundations. While walking, and spoke again. Tell me everything you remember about that night at Balmoral. William inhaled slowly. The memory was faint, fragmented, filtered through childhood, but vivid in its unease. There was a gathering. Late. No children were supposed to be awake, but I was told to attend. Not by my parents. By a different relative. And didn't interrupt. There were candles. Not for ambience. For tradition. There was a reading. Something about duty. Legacy. Protection of bloodlines. And steps slowed. Who else was there? William shook his head. They were masked. And absorbed that. How many? William thought. 7. Maybe 8. And murmured the number back to herself. 7 or 8. And something about it seemed to settle into place. And the knife? William nodded. It was held up. Not pointed. Displayed. Like proof. And stopped walking. Proof of what? William closed his eyes briefly, accessing the deepest part of the memory. Proof that someone existed. The words hung between them like a suspended blade. They continued walking until they reached a small, windowless room. A former writing chamber, and used and unmonitored, and closed the door behind them. For the first time, they were alone without threat of being overheard. William leaned against the heavy oak table. You think someone was born whose existence was concealed? And answered without hesitation. Yes. William swallowed. And that person, and finished again, is connected to Sarah. William stared at her. By blood. And didn't blink. Possibly. William ran a hand through his hair. Why would Sarah be chosen? And offered several possibilities. Because she was loyal. Because she was exiled. Because she could be discredited if needed. Because she could travel without suspicion. Because no one would believe her if she spoke. All painfully plausible. William asked the next question with dread. And what if the person, the hidden one, is alive now? And replied quietly. They would be an adult. An adult with a dormant claim. An adult with a suppressed identity. An adult with a motive to emerge. William looked up sharply. And the mask? And nodded. To conceal them until the moment they must be revealed. William felt the weight of that. And the knife? Anne's voice lowered further. To defend that claim. The room felt colder now, because suddenly, everything aligned. The secret gathering, the erased ancestor, the engraved knife, the mask, the inscription, the torn note, the stage drawer, the removed Sarah, the surveillance photo. All pieces of a single truth. Someone was positioning a return. William exhaled, the air tight in his lungs. If this is true, and finished with finality, then the monarchy is standing on a fault line. But William thought of something else. Something worse. There's something we haven't considered. And waited. What if the person with the claim doesn't want the throne? And understood instantly. But someone else wants it for them. A puppet heir. A controlled bloodline. A weaponized succession. William's voice dropped. Someone inside the family. Anne's expression did not change. Or someone outside it. William felt a chill crawl up his spine. Someone with influence. Someone with resources. Someone with access. Someone who could enter a private bedroom. Place the objects. Remove Sarah. And send a photograph. In less than 3 hours. And spoke with clarity sharpened by certainty. There is only one category of person who could do that. William nodded grimly. Intelligence trained. And added another layer. And emotionally invested. William's pulse pounded. Someone with history. Someone with grievance. Someone with proximity. And concluded. Someone we already know. Before William could respond, something unexpected happened. A knock. Not on the door of the room they were in. On the door of the hallway outside it. 3 slow taps. Then silence. And then William exchanged a look. Someone had followed them. Someone had tracked them here. Someone knew they sought privacy. William stepped toward the door, and stopped him with a hand. Wait. They listened. Another sound. A slip of paper being pushed beneath the door. Then footsteps retreating. William bent and picked up the paper. No envelope. No seal. Just a message. Written in the same handwriting as the torn note. It read, "You are already too late." William looked at it. And looked at William. Because now, there was no denying it. The game had started. And what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. The message lay between them like a spark on dry grass. 6 words. Simple. Unadorned. Terrifying in their confidence. You are already too late. William stared at it. The ink sharp against the cream paper. The handwriting identical to the torn note found beneath the knife. And didn't touch it. She didn't need to. She understood something William was still processing. This wasn't a warning. It was a declaration. Whoever sent it wasn't trying to stop them. They were informing them. Updating them. As though Anne and William weren't investigators, but observers. As though someone else held the reins. As though the next move had already been made. William lifted the paper to the lamplight. It's the same hand, he said. The same person who wrote the first note. And nodded once. And the same person who removed the other half. William folded the message, not out of habit, but to prevent his hands from shaking, not from fear, but from anger. He took a slow breath, grounding himself. The monarchy trained its heirs to regulate emotion, but training doesn't erase adrenaline. And began to speak. This means, William finished it for her. Whatever happened with Sarah has already progressed. And silence confirmed it. But something else was buried in that note. Something subtle, something psychological. The phrasing wasn't accusatory. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't begging, threatening, or bargaining. It was composed, certain, predictive, and narrowed her eyes. This isn't someone acting alone. William agreed. It's coordinated. And began pacing again, her steps carrying the rhythm of her thoughts. We need to consider every possibility. If Sarah was taken, there are only a few ways it could have been done without alerting staff. William added. Or she left willingly with someone she trusted. And didn't dismiss it. Trust can be manufactured. William thought of the photo behind the frame, the hidden picture of Sarah with the unidentified man. Someone connected to her past. And nodded. Someone who could convince her to move without alerting anyone. William tried to recall the man's face, the angle of his shoulders, the way he stood behind Sarah. Not as a friend, not as a partner, but as something else. Protective? Secretive? Controlling? Who was he? And interrupted his thoughts with a different angle. Let's focus on the message. Why tell us we're too late? William considered. To push us in the wrong direction. And nodded. To make us chase the wrong lead. William's eyes sharpened. Or to make us think the situation is irreversible. And added. Or to make us act rashly. That possibility mattered. Rash actions create exposure. Exposure creates vulnerability. Vulnerability creates leverage, and leverage is the currency of secrets. William set the message on the table. So what's the next step? And lifted her gaze. We determine what too late refers to. William listed possibilities aloud, thinking as he spoke. Too late to find Sarah. Too late to retrieve what was taken. Too late to prevent a revelation. Too late to stop someone from stepping forward. And voiced the darkest possibility. Too late to contain the truth. Containment, a word that echoed through palace history like thunder. Every generation had its containment. A scandal rewritten. A child reassigned parentage. A marriage reframed. A medical diagnosis renamed. A disappearance redefined. The monarchy didn't erase events. It rewrote them. William asked, what truth would justify a message like this? And answered, one that changes the line of succession. William felt the weight of that land squarely on his shoulders. He wasn't just a participant in this unfolding story. He was its consequence. But another question clawed at him. If someone had a claim, why reveal it now? And replied, because moments of transition are moments of opportunity. William thought of his father, his health, his responsibilities, the pressure, the uncertainty, and watched him closely. You're thinking it too. William nodded. Someone believes the future is vulnerable, and spoke with precision. Someone believes they can influence it. William leaned his hands on the table. So who gains the most by destabilizing the line of succession? And responded without hesitation. Someone who isn't in it. That narrowed the field dramatically, but it also expanded the danger. William shifted to another angle. Let's go back to the aid. He said Sarah told him she was going somewhere she used to feel safe. And nodded. There are 3 possibilities. William recited them. A private estate. A residence abroad. Or, and finished, the cottage. William froze. The cottage was different. It wasn't glamorous, political, or visible. It was personal. A place tied to memory, not status. A place Sarah had once retreated to when she was at her lowest point. A place no one in the public even knew existed unless they were part of the inner circle decades ago. William spoke slowly. If she went there, and completed the thought, then she went to meet someone. William followed the logic. Someone she trusted. Someone she believed could protect her. Someone connected to whatever she was safeguarding. Anne's voice sharpened. And if we were meant to find the mask and the knife, then we were meant to follow her. William straightened. It's a trail. And nodded. A controlled one. William let the truth settle. So we're not too late to stop something. We're too late to stop being involved. Anne's expression didn't change, but her silence confirmed it. William asked, do we go there? And didn't answer immediately. She was weighing variables. If we go, someone will know. If we don't go, someone will assume we're afraid. Either option benefits the person controlling this. William exhaled. So we choose the benefit we can use. And nodded. Exactly. William stepped toward the door, and stopped him again. Not yet. We need to think. William frowned. About what? And looked directly at him. About who we tell. The question landed like a stone. William considered his father. Not yet. He considered his brother. No. He considered the queen. When she lived, she would have been the only answer. But now? And saw his hesitation. There is only one person we can trust with this. William asked who. And replied. Someone who understands the family's hidden history. Someone who knows what was erased. Someone who was alive when the original events occurred. William's eyes widened. No. And held his gaze. Yes. William shook his head slightly. He won't speak. And responded. He will if he believes the past is resurfacing. William swallowed. Prince Andrew. And confirmed it. He was there that night at Balmoral. William looked away. And he has every motive to stay silent. And clarified. And every motive to protect someone, if that someone exists. William felt the implications coil around him like tightening rope. So the question becomes, and finished, was Sarah protecting a secret for herself? Or for him? The room seemed to tilt. Because that possibility, the one neither of them wanted to say aloud, was suddenly unavoidable. What if the hidden lineage didn't belong to a distant ancestor, but to someone still alive? Someone disgraced. Someone whose children were already whispered about. Someone whose timeline aligned. Someone whose scandals had always seemed strangely insulated. Someone whose fall had been severe, but whose protection had been strangely persistent. And spoke the unspoken thought. What if Sarah wasn't hiding the past, but the future? William's breath caught. And what if someone else wants to use that future against us and didn't blink? Then we aren't too late to prevent it. We're too late to avoid it. Before William could respond, his phone vibrated again. Another message. He opened it and watched his face drain of color. "What is it?" she demanded. William turned the phone so she could see. It was a live map location. A pin dropped. Coordinates. The cottage. And beneath it, another message. "She's waiting." William felt the room close around him and steadied her voice. "This is a trap." William nodded. "I know." Anne's eyes narrowed. "And you're going anyway." William didn't hesitate. "Yes." And stepped closer, her tone steel. "Then you're not going alone." William asked the only question left. "Who else comes?" And answered without pause. "Someone who understands how traps are built. Someone who knows how to walk into danger without being seen. Someone whose loyalty is proven. Someone whose silence is absolute." William understood. A single name formed. Not a royal. Not a politician. Not a guard. Someone whose role is never acknowledged publicly. Someone whose work never appears in newspapers. Someone who protects the crown without recognition. And spoke the title. The Keeper. William nodded slowly. But there hadn't been a keeper assigned since. And finished. Since the last time a hidden heir threatened the throne. William's pulse quickened. Is he still alive? And looked toward the door. "We're about to find out." And just as she reached for the handle, the lights went out. Not just in the room. In the entire wing. Silence. Darkness. Then, the sound of a door unlocking somewhere nearby. Not opening. Unlocking. And whispered, "We're not alone." And what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. The darkness fell like a curtain, sudden, total, deliberate. Not a flicker. Not a dimming. A complete blackout. William froze, his senses sharpening instantly. Princess and didn't gasp, didn't startle, didn't reach for support. She stood perfectly still, letting her ears replace her eyes. The air in the corridor changed, shifting with the quiet pressure of someone else moving nearby. Not rushing, not stumbling, moving with intention. William whispered, "Power outage," and answered, "No, power cut." There was a difference. An outage was accidental. A cut was controlled. William's phone screen provided the only light, a faint glow illuminating the tension in his jaw, and spoke again, voice low. "Do not move until we know where they are." William listened. At first, there was only the silence of the corridor. But then, soft, measured footsteps. Not approaching, not retreating, circling, as though someone was positioning themselves between escape routes. And adjusted her stance slightly, not defensive, but prepared. She had spent her life reading the unseen currents within the palace, and she recognized this one. "Someone wants to isolate us." William tilted his head, tracking the sound. The footsteps weren't coming from a single direction. They echoed, multiplied by stone, bouncing off door frames and archways, making it impossible to determine origin. Then, another sound. A metallic click. Not loud. Precise. Like a lock being engaged. And whispered, "They're sealing access points." William felt a chill move up his spine, not from fear, but from certainty. Whoever orchestrated this was not improvising. They had planned, anticipated, timed, and continued. "They don't want anyone entering this wing," William added. "Or leaving." The faintest trace of light appeared at the far end of the hallway, a thin, pale sliver beneath a door. Not enough to see by, but enough to orient themselves. And gestured, moved toward the light. Slowly. They walked in silence, footsteps soundless against the carpet. William stayed slightly ahead, his phone lighting their path in a muted glow. The air felt heavier here, as though the walls themselves were holding breath. Halfway down the corridor, the footsteps stopped. Not theirs, the other ones, and lifted a hand. "Stop." They obeyed. The silence returned. Heavy, listening, expectant. William whispered, "They know we're moving," and responded, "They knew the moment we entered Sarah's room." William thought of the photograph, the message, the tracking. Someone was always one step ahead. They reached the door where the faint strip of light shone. William reached out, testing the handle. Locked, and placed her hand beneath the doorframe, feeling for airflow, pressure, warmth. "This room has emergency power." William nodded. So someone chose which rooms stayed dark and which stayed lit. And confirmed, meaning they have access to internal controls. That narrowed the suspects further. Only a handful of individuals, fewer than 10, had that level of access, and none of them were supposed to be anywhere near this wing. William stepped back from the door. "We need to get to the old passageway," and agreed. "If the keeper is still alive, that's where he'll be." William lowered his voice. "And if he's not?" And answered without hesitation. "Then we find out who replaced him." They turned, moving back down the corridor, this time toward the oldest part of the estate. A section untouched by modernization, untouched by rewiring, untouched by surveillance. But the blackout had transformed familiar walls into an unlit maze. William whispered, "What if this is meant to stop us reaching him?" And replied, "Then it confirms he knows something." As they neared the stone archway leading to the antiquated hall, the sound returned. Not footsteps. Breathing. Close. Too close.